Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us on our first edition of HE Talks 2024. So I'll be introducing today's session. My name is Mónica Angulo. I am Project Manager of Higher Education at British Council Mexico, and we are leading several projects related to gender equality in higher education institutions. So for those who are not familiar to the British Council, we are an international organization for cultural relations between the UK and countries worldwide. We support peace and prosperity by building connections, understanding, and trust. And gender equality is a very important part of what we do as cultural relations organization that promotes equality, diversity, and inclusion as core values. So today we're launching the first edition of HE Talks. HE Talks are a series of masterclasses with experts focusing on the latest trends and strategic issues in higher education, including internationalization, transnational education or TNE, gender equality in higher education institutions, and women participation in STEM. And this initiative complements our efforts to establish communities of practice in Mexico, supporting gender equality and other activities under our flagship program named Women Mentors in Science. So before we start on the contents of today's session, I would like to highlight that the British Council has a safeguarding policy that we put in place in everything we do. We aim to create a safe environment in which no one will experience any harm, any abuse, or any kind of exploitation during their contact with us. So your protection, is our commitment. We encourage you to bring to our attention immediately any concern related to safeguarding during this session. And for more information about our safeguarding policy or to report any situation, please use the QR code displayed on the screen. Remember, this session is being recorded and will be available in our Facebook and YouTube channels, and you are welcome and encouraged to post your comments and questions in the Q&A box. And all questions are welcome either in Spanish or English. So today, I have the pleasure to present Dr. Jörg Müller, who will introduce us to the Gender Equality Audit and Monitoring. Jörg Müller is a senior researcher at the Internet Interdisciplinary Institute at Universitat Oberta de Catalunya in Barcelona, Spain. He obtained his PhD in communications at the European Graduate School in Switzerland and holds a degree in sociology and computer science from the Free University in Berlin, Germany. He has coordinated several European projects on gender equality in research and innovation, and currently forms part of the coordination team of INSPIRE, which aims to build Europe's Center of Excellence on Inclusive Gender Equality in Research and Innovation. Jörg will be presenting in the next 30 to 40 minutes, and we will leave the last 10 minutes of the session to take questions from the audience. Thank you for joining us today, Jörg. Over to you.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and to talk a little bit about the work that we do at the Open University of Catalonia and give you some insights into this tool that we have been developing for several years now, the Gender Equality Audit and Monitoring tool, and how you can use this in your equality efforts in a university, research center, or in other organizations. As Monica said, I will be presenting this in English, but later on there's no problem if you have any questions in Spanish. I will also then respond in Spanish, so that's absolutely fine. Let me just share my screen now. So you should see my main screen and it changes, right? Monica just introduced me. Thank you very much. So we are a research group located at the Open University of Catalonia, which is a distance university. And we have a research group on gender and ICT where we have over the past 15, 20 years, we have participated in many European projects on the topic of gender and science. And maybe you come across some of this. So we maintain a portal on gender and science resources, GenPort, for example. It's still out there, which we set up in 2013. So it's quite some while ago. There was a big project on communities of practice, the ACT project, which finished. And as a follow-up, almost you could say, we are now coordinating the project Inspire, which is now coordinated by my colleague Rachel Palmen. And this is to build the European Center of Excellence for Inclusive Gender Equality in R&I. And it's in this context that I'm going to speak a little bit about the GEAM. So content of the session today, basically, I will set a little bit the stage, how the GEAM fits into wider agenda of change. Let's say, if you are planning to implement a gender equality plan inside an organization. So GEAM could be one element in this bigger approach. Then I'm going to explain you how to use the GEAM. So it's actually a questionnaire, but it's much more. It's as a, a surrounding infrastructure around this. So how does it really work if you want to do this? And then we also go a little bit deeper into the actual modules and questions. So the topic that the questionnaires cover. And probably this will take all our time, but then there's actually another section of the talk, maybe in the future, or that has been also part of other training seminars that we've given. It's about, how can you collect intersectional data with a GEAM and then do a corresponding analysis. But I don't think we get to that. Basically, the learning outcomes correspond to these main sections of my talk. So first of all, really understand the potential of the GEAM, but also the limits of the GEAM. So, it's, as I said, one part of designing and implementing and monitoring a gender equality plan. This is where it's really useful and what it can do, but you can't expect, I will do a questionnaire and then all my problems are solved. It's a broader infrastructure. It's a questionnaire. It's an online questionnaire. There's a manual. There's a reporting template. So what is the overall infrastructure? And it's also a service, if you want, that we offer to run this survey in your organization. Then what are really the basic components? And there are two questionnaires actually now since the Inspire project. This is some of the work that we've done more recently is, one questionnaire targeting employees, including administrative and academic stuff. But then there's a new version now for students as well to capture student experience. And as I said, the concept of equality data, this would be something to go a little bit more in depth. So setting the stage, when does it really make sense to use the GEAM inside your organization? And there are gender equality plans which, have been quite prominent, at least on a European level. I'm not so much familiar in the situation in Mexico, but at the European level, gender equality plans have become really a main policy instrument, for improving the European research and innovation landscape. I don't know if you're familiar with our main funding framework in Europe. It's called Horizon Europe currently, which is running from 2021 to 2027, sorry. And, it has allocated 93 billion euros of investment in research and innovation. And this is, organized during pluriannual work programs, and then you apply for this. And if you're lucky, you get a project. And one condition really in order to participate as an institution, since now 2021, is really to have a gender equality plan. Your university cannot apply for funding if it doesn't have a gender equality plan inside the organization. So it's really one crucial element for structural change. This is also a reflection of how the policy approach has evolved in Europe. So whereas initially there were many support actions targeting specifically women in terms of, skills training, how to make a better CV, how to present themselves better in recruitment or promotion rounds. This has been, understood as being limited because the problem is not with the women, but it's with the wider structures, how universities are run, what we understand in excellence, the bias in recruitment and promotion, and so on and so forth. So in order to tackle this as a more structural problem, gender inequality, we have gender equality plans, really. So, and the idea is that this improves not only the work environment, and the well-being of all employees, but that it also leads to better research and innovation, because the more people the more diverse, if you have more diverse population of researchers able to participate and to contribute to research and innovation, there is a broader spectrum of knowledge, ideas that in the end contribute to a solution, to new products, new services, which also, as they reflect the broader, more diverse needs, are more effective. And this also includes part of those gender equality plans is a greater understanding of sex and gender specificities in research and innovation. How is this different? How is sex from gender different? And how do we have to address this? For example, if it's medical research, you have to be really sure you understand the differences, sex differences between organisms, not only on a human level, but in the animal world in general, or then gender specifics, how do gender roles really condition behavior, which often then interact also with the sex. And there is one big instrument or tool or guidance that we have. This is the GEAR tool, which is hosted by the European Institute of Gender Equality. And there's the URL if you want to check this out. So it's a whole framework, how to set up, how to design a gender equality plan, how to implement it, how then to monitor it and evaluate it. So it's a whole 6-stage process that is recommended to be implemented. And this eligibility criterion to access funding, it makes specific requirements how your gender equality plan should look like. So there are 4 mandatory gap process requirements. So each gender equality plan needs to be a public document. So it's not good if it's hidden in some cupboard inside the university. It needs to be public on the web. Needs to be equipped with dedicated resources. So, it's not just a paper, but there need to be resources to implement it. There need to be data collection and monitoring attached to the plan. And this is where the GEAM then comes in. And there needs to be training and capacity building. And overall, there are 5 recommended gender equality content areas. They're recommended, they're not required, because depending on institution, they might be adapted, which are dealing with work-life balance issues, organizational culture, gender balance in leadership and decision-making, gender equality in recruitment and career progression, integration of the gender dimension in research and teaching, measures against gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. So this gives you already an overview of the thematic dimensions, if you want, of a gender equality plan. And in a way, what the GEAM does is also, cover these different areas in terms of the questions it asks and the information it gathers, that in the end, if you are about to design a gender equality plan, you know what's currently happened or what has changed in your university regarding these main areas. Okay. So as I said, the GEAR tool recommends like 6 steps, which the first step is like starting, and the 6th step is really about how to continue, how to basically make a new plan and take it to the next stage. But the main stages or steps when implementing a gender equality plan is first to make an initial audit, understand the context, understand what are the needs of your organization, which is here, indicated as analyze. Analyze the context you're in order to understand what are the needs that then you convert into a plan. You design the intervention that address those needs, right? And once it's designed, you go and implement these actions in your organization. And after a while, you monitor, well, did this have any impact, what we designed, what we're currently doing? Is there any change taking place? And you can see now where the GEAM really comes in. It's quite crucial during the first assessment for understanding what you are dealing with, what are the inequalities that are really, should be addressed in your organization. And then once you went through a cycle, which is usually 4 years, towards the end of those 4 years, you can run a second time a GEAM and see, if this has really all the actions that you have implemented, if there is really a change. So it's crucial about for learning really if your plan works, and then you can make adjustments during the second cycle of your gender equality plan. So it's at the beginning and towards the end are usually the good moments to run a GEAM. It's also important to understand that the GEAM is just one data source among many others. So if you think about now, analyze, understand your context, the first stage, this is also often called a gap audit, gender equality audit. And usually this involves different data sources, which is human resources. They should participate in this initial audit because they have very good data on how many men and women are at different career stages, for example, if there are gender gaps in terms of salary, for example. So, that's quite an important data source. Usually you also want to talk to different stakeholder groups inside your organization. Let's say, I don't know, students or staff in different departments or faculties. So you can do this with focus groups. You can do this with interviews. Maybe you want to analyze, how the university really presents itself to the outside world on their website, their flyers, brochures, and so on and so forth. So text and image analysis might be another source you want to look at during this initial audit. But the GEAM also is a very valuable source in terms of catching and capturing the experiences, the beliefs, the awareness of staff and students inside the university. So it's quite a specific role and specific type of data it collects. And it's mostly quantitative data. There are open questions in the GEAM survey, but most of the data that you will get is really of quantitative nature. Okay. So, this is a little bit to provide the overall picture of where the GEAM comes in. And now I want to tell you a little bit, the GEAM, the infrastructure, what's really involved. So in a nutshell, it's about designing or implementing surveys for, gathering baseline data for understanding the current needs in your organization regarding gender equality plans. So, and the baseline assumption is really that those surveys are often implemented by people that are not necessarily experts in terms of questionnaires and, efficient and reliable and valid questionnaire design. So what we did is, well, let's look at how these surveys, many of these surveys are designed and made based on a scientific literature. Let's propose a good survey that users then can adapt without too much, expertise in this field and implement. So instead of reinventing the wheel many times and, wheels that don't work so good, so let's provide a good template that people then can merely adapt to the needs of their institution and run, and be relatively sure, or be sure, that the data that you collect is of good quality. And if you have a sufficient high response rate, you can actually then generalize across the entire organization. So as I said, it's standardized, it's adaptable, and it's comprehensive and transnational, because we have translated this questionnaire into Spanish, but in also many other European languages, which makes it really interesting also from a comparative perspective, how I might compare to other universities. Although the important thing to understand here is really that the data you collect is your data. If you want to compare, you need to find someone else who also wants to compare. So, it's not that we own the data. The data is yours, and what you want to do with the data really depends on you. It's an open survey reporting infrastructure, and I will get to that. And so far, since we developed the first version in 2020 during the ACT project, there are more than 50 organizations now that have used the GEAM, and I think overall the experience is quite positive. So the GEAM in a nutshell is, you get high quality comparable data about gender equality plans in your organization and gender inequalities, the situation, gender inequality in your organization. And why would you use the GEAM? So there are basically two, if you remember the slide that I presented just a couple of minutes ago, there are two big sources of information. One is human resources, for example, administrative data on the one hand, very important, because, it's a centralized data source, it's reliable, it's exact, it's really for the entire organization. But it usually is not enough to capture really what people experience, what they feel, what they know. It's just the head count usually, or the wage count. So it's quite factual numbers, but they don't get to the more qualitative dimension of inequalities that people might be exposed to in an organization. So if you want to get that, you need survey-based data, and this is the bottom line here. Staff and students, you do this survey, and then you get the experiences, for example, on gender-based violence. It's very depending on which procedure you have set up in the university, and if people trust this procedure, you get more or less reporting on gender-based violence, for example. If a survey is anonymous, people might be more encouraged to speak up or indicate really their experiences there, and you get an overview how frequent these incidents are. You can ask about, the awareness on gender issues of respondents, job satisfaction, the perception of gender equality inside the organization. The disadvantage being that if you usually do a survey, not everybody responds, so you have to play here with your response rate, and then depending on that, it depends how representative really your survey and your insights going to be. So the GEAM basically provides insights about individual experiences, as I said, for example, on discrimination, perceptions, awareness, beliefs among employees or students regarding different aspects of organizational reality and cultural values. And later on, we go a little bit, I show you which questions we have, so you see what this is. But it also can provide, insights on factual working conditions of employees. For example, human resources won't cooperate with you. They won't give you the data. So if you want to know percentage on fixed term or temporary contracts among your academic staff, for example, there's a question in the GEAM which covers this, and depending on your response rate, you get a good sense of, how many fixed term contracts there are, how many temporary contracts, and then of course, are there gender differences regarding these type of contracts. And you get also information on socio-demographic variables. Usually human resources, if they have it at all, it's very limited in terms of, if you ask about gender, it's usually only binary, man or woman. If you want to have more categories for gender, you need to use this survey. But we also ask about sexual orientation, disability, illness, partnership status, ethnic, racialized group, trans history, socioeconomic background, class, and nationality. So there's a lot of information in there that will enable you not just to detect differences between men and women inside your organization, but also regarding, for example, discrimination of gay or lesbian people and sexual orientation, right? Or any ethnic racialized group. So it's really comprehensive in this sense. And this allows you then not only to say, there are different numbers of men and women in departments, but it also allows you to say something, there's an overlap, let's say, between women, racialized women, which are really experiencing much more harassment than any other group in the university. So of course you can then make intersectional analysis of these categories and understand better, where are the, let's say, very challenging situations or demographic groups inside your university that need to be addressed. I also said, the GEAM is an infrastructure. So what does this mean? It means basically we have a template, an online questionnaire template, which is based on Lime Survey, which is like, an open source survey platform. You might have heard there are many out there, SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, and so on and so forth. Lime Survey is open source, which means we have installed this on our server. Maybe your university runs a Lime Survey as well. And it allows you then to import, for example, the questionnaire that we have and run it on your own server. So, it's really flexible. We have this on our server. There's a template, and you basically request a copy of the questionnaire, which we will set up for you. And then you can customize this instance according to your needs. So you can add new questions, you can remove questions. There are some questions that the answer items need to be added as well. And then you launch it. And once you're satisfied with the response rate, you either download, you need to download the results, but then there's also a reporting template, which generates, the descriptive statistics in Word format or a web format for you. So, it's a broader context. It's an online service, if you want, which also includes then in the end a reporting template. Some credits as well. As I said, the GEAM was developed during the ACT project, the first version, GEAM version 2, with the involvement of Advanced Higher Education from the UK. They were a project partner. Us from the Open University of Catalonia, Notus, and Jagiellonian University in Poland. Notus is also from Spain in Barcelona. And you see that this collaboration has continued between Jagiellonian University, Open University, and Notus for the development of the GEAM version 3 in the Inspire project. There is an online manual as well, if you want to browse that, which explains you basically a little bit the background, also in terms of what it means to collect equality data. And then there are the URLs of the questionnaire. So the best way to really explore those questionnaires is to actually go online, click on those URLs. I guess the PDFs, the slides will be distributed later on, or otherwise you go to the GEAM site where you also find these URLs. You click on it and then you can browse the online version of the questionnaire and see how it looks. Also note that there is, at the end of the URL, there's like a language, 2-letter language code, You see it here, it's EN, it's for English, but if you put in ES, it puts you to the Spanish version. Okay, the whole framework is also based on an open philosophy. So, the questionnaires are online. If you have a Lime server platform on your university server or any other, you can take the questionnaire file with you and run it on your own server. Many of the translations actually have been provided by users. So it's not that we have translated everything. We started with a translation, but then many of the languages that you see here in Greek, Italian, Slovenian, Romanian actually have been provided by users like you, I guess. There is the online manual, which is also an open file on GitHub, if you're familiar with this for contribution. There's this reporting template as well. And part of the Inspire framework is also further on to provide an analysis handbook. So, how to do a little bit more sophisticated analysis with the data that goes beyond just, descriptive statistic and some crosstabs according to gender. Okay. Here is an overview of the translations and who participated, which is also in the manual. So it's not that I need to tell many more things here. The GEAM students, the translations, so far we have Polish and Spanish only, since this is work which is ongoing and it hasn't been used as much as the employee version. And then there's also some reading if you want to really get into the way that we have developed the GEAM during the ACT project. There's actually a chapter in a book, which is open source. You can download and read as well on the development. And then there is a background report on Zenodo, which is also open, which explains you the scientific background of the measurement scales that we use and why we use certain measurement scales and not others, and it provides you a little bit of conceptual and theoretical background to this whole thing, which might also be of interest. Okay, let me go a little bit into the actual content of the GEAM. And let me start with what's new. What we have done during the Inspire project. For the GEAM employees, basically, we made more specific questions to distinguish between administrative stuff and academic stuff. So, there are questions like, next one about teaching responsibilities, which only makes sense for academic stuff, but not for administrative stuff. So, we improved a little bit the filters that we use, that depending on who responds, they see one type of question or the other. There's now also an explicit question about leadership responsibilities, which was not in the second version. We have revised our COVID module. So the first version was developed during COVID, and we had then integrated questions about teleworking. This is now more generalized, so it's not specific anymore to COVID, but it's about the whole teleworking thing and how does this affect your work, and do you have the opportunities and so on and so forth. And then we have updated and revised the modules on sexual harassment and bullying. And this is basically due to a dedicated project, which is called UNICEF. You might have heard, also financed by the European Commission. So there was a dedicated project on gender-based violence, sexual harassment and bullying. And they have also made a questionnaire. So we adapted our module based on their insights as well. And then we have also a new item on bias against women in leadership positions. Sorry. And the GEAM student basically is based on what we had for the employees, but then specifically adapted to the student situation, and we also used this new module of gender-based violence from the UNICEF project. So there are 4 big components for employees: sociodemographics, working conditions, organizational culture and climate, and interpersonal behavior. Basically, again, at the bottom of the slide, you can see the URL to browse the actual questionnaire. Sociodemographics, I already mentioned this. This is really enables you then to analyze differences in the responses according to those dimensions that might be of interest for you. Gender, of course. Age, also very important. Then ethnic, minority, and so on and so forth. So this is very, very important also for an intersectional analysis. Then working conditions, as the category says, it's a type of contract, the pay people have, current position they are in, experiences with recruitment and promotion, the training opportunities they have, care responsibilities, important, so parental leave and so on and so forth, work-life balance, job satisfaction, flexible working. This was related to the COVID module, which you see it's crossed out, and parental leave. In red are the items that are new, basically, and in green, those that we revised for this current version. Organizational culture and climate basically is about, perceptions of discrimination that people might have. And these perceptions are often as important and have as negative consequences in case, you feel discriminated against as actual objective discrimination, if you want, if there's such a thing. So it's, it's about perceived discrimination, but, there's solid evidence that this is as substantial and impactful, even if then, on an organizational comparative level, maybe it's not so substantial, but it's really about the perception. Working culture, recognition and duties, the promotion criteria. There's one specific scale on masculinity contest, so how competitive and aggressive the work environment is perceived. And then there's this new scale also for gender bias women leaders. And on interpersonal behavior, there's a whole module on microaggressions, bullying, sexual harassment, then also the confidence of people to report this within the organization, and if they are satisfied, if they were satisfied with the institutional response in this area. So it's quite comprehensive, as you can see. So this is, again, a little bit more into detail. I don't want to go into each question. Just here, the important thing is that actually sociodemographic is split. So we ask about age and gender right from the beginning. And then at the very end of the questionnaire, they have all these other variables in case respondents don't get to the very end. You still can use the data and make the basic analysis in terms of age and gender of the responses. So here you see working conditions, the current job. If people have a leadership position or teaching responsibilities, this was not included. And then you see also some of the scales that we use, for example, for work-life balance. These are internationally used scales, which also is interesting because it allows you to compare, the situation inside your organization, for example, in terms of work-family conflict with the average in your country, the average in your country or other organizations. Working condition, the flexible working arrangements, as I mentioned, parental leave. It's quite comprehensive since it has such a central role in terms of gender equality. Culture and climate. There is a new scale, gender bias scale for women leaders that we integrated, and many of these scales are really, the response are Likert scale, ranging from agreement to disagreement. So for example, in general, men and women are treated equally in my organization. This is one item, and then people respond to this: strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree or strongly disagree. And this, like most of these culture and climate questions, are organized. Then the module on employees' behavioral bullying, you also see here, the 3 different sections. And if you're especially interested in this one, there's actually a report that explains how the items have been constructed there. Just very briefly, also, the student questionnaire, as you can see, socio-demographic is basically the same. Behavior, interpersonal behavior is basically the same, but the working conditions we have separated, in student situation, what do they study, study life balance, and the educational experience. So, how engaged they are, any obstacles they find, and how they participate in research and innovation. These are basically the main differences here. Again, we maintain the difference between age and gender, and then more sociodemographics, including language skills, which I think is very important also for students, if there are foreign students involved. Current studies, study life balance, you see here, time allocation, care responsibilities, satisfaction, and so on and so forth. Also, one important item on stress and burnout. The educational experience, their specific scale on academic engagement or obstacles to academic success. Campus student culture, perceptions of student environment, equal treatment, and so on. And then basically the same questions regarding bullying, harassment, and microaggressions. So take-home points for the GEAM. It's free to use, basically, because running a survey currently, we do this in the context of the Inspire project. So you can ask us for an account. We will set this up, and this is really free for you. It saves you a lot of time for designing a questionnaire, implementing online, and then also reporting. So this is all done, and you can be sure, this is really good quality data that you will gather. You still need to adapt it to your institutional context. As I said, there might be, imagine you want to run this inside your entire university. So it's probably good idea to add an additional questions. Where are people located in terms of faculties or departments? Specific job descriptions, what's the internal job descriptions you have in your university. This you need to adapt, of course, because each institution is different, and so on and so forth. So, and there might be specific questions that you want to ask as well that you can add. And in the end, you also very important, you own the data. In fact, you can't start launching a survey until you sign with us a data agreement that you take responsibility for your data, the data that you generate, because as you can imagine, the data is quite comprehensive that gets collected, and then you also need to take precaution how you store this data, how you analyze what you publish from this data, the reports, and so on and so forth. So it's quite, it's not easy. It's you need to know what you do, and for that we need to sign this mutual agreement. And what still remains a challenge, and we are currently working on as well, is how can we help people in really taking advantage of the data they have generated, because the data in itself is good, but then often it remains simply on a descriptive level, gender differences, I don't know, in types of contract and certain experience and job satisfaction. But actually, I think there can be much more interesting analysis made. If you have a statistician that to help you, this would be the perfect situation, the ideal situation. But if not, it's quite tricky still. So in order to get started, one important thing is that usually we don't approve accounts or set up accounts if you're not sure that you can launch within the next 3 months. Since the questionnaire itself is online, you can browse it, you can get a very good picture of what you need to modify or what you need to do. You can discuss this in your teams in the university. And once you have a really clear understanding what needs to be done and the permissions you have to ask inside your university and so on and so forth, once you know that more or less within 3 months we are ready to launch, we set up the account, give you access, you start modifying all the things that you need, and then you launch. Because often what happened in the past, we get lots of requests and we set up the accounts and then nothing happens, and it's our time waste basically. So there are these questionnaires online. You can browse them. There is the manual. You can look and read up. And as I said, once this is, you have a clear picture and you can launch within the next 3 months, you write us an account, and then we set up everything for you. And of course, if you have any questions, you can also write to us, no problem. And with this, I will stop here, go out, and I think we have like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes for questions. So I haven't been looking into the chat, but I don't know if people want to.
Thank you, Jörg. We have one question, but I think it's been responded already from Lorena Duran. He asked if this questionnaire and the rest of the tools are to be sold, but you already mentioned that this is a free tool, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for the time being, the Inspire project is 4 years in total. We are in year 2, so there are at least another 2 years of the project where using the tool is free.
Great, and we will be very happy to share the presentation with everyone that registered to this session. And I don't know if someone else has a question that would like to address to Jörg. They are free to open their mics, or either if you have a comment on or your impressions. It's been really interesting to learn more about all the history of the creation of the tool, and I was personally very impressed, and I think it will be a very useful tool for everyone that is starting to think about how to build their gender equality plans inside their institutions. So we thought that this was a very useful tool for our community to learn of.
Yeah, it might even, sometimes it's even, because it covers these different areas of working conditions, the culture, gender-based violence often gives also people the opportunity to think about, what do we need to cover really when we start designing a gender equality plan. So, yeah.
We have one question on the Q&A box from Susana Carmody. Has the tool been tested much outside Europe?
No, not too much. Most of the questionnaires so far have been used in Europe, Poland, Spain, Germany, France, England, Argentina has used the questionnaire, but outside of Europe in general, not too much, no.
Great. We have another question from Macaria Hernandez. The results that we get from the questionnaire can be published?
Well, the results that you get, you have to be careful, because I definitely would not recommend, to publish the raw data matrix, but aggregate this, because you have to control the disclosure. imagine you have many socio-demographic variables, and it's easy to spot, even if you don't have a name or any idea, who is who, if you want. How many managers are there of a certain age, gender, and maybe, ethnic background. So you have to be very careful what you publish. So, but there are also recommendations, how you should aggregate and round these results before publishing.
Thank you, Jörg. We have another question from Maria Elena Tejada. Do you provide tools to diminish the feeling of whistleblowing when surveying sensitive topics such as payroll, violent environments, etc., for people within a higher education institution?
Do we provide tools? I'm not sure if I understand the question. I mean, the questionnaire is what it is. We don't provide any additional tools on that. But in the end, it really comes down to the relation of trust, let's say, who runs the survey within the organization. Because people, if people don't trust what's going to happen with their data and don't trust the people who are doing the survey, they probably won't respond. So there's actually the way you design and start with this initial audit usually should involve, your main stakeholder groups in the university, because this is the opportunity then to get those people involved and build the trust of what's going to happen with the data and how it's going to be analyzed and to what use it's going to be put. Data in itself, can be used for more policing or for improving the situation, gender equality, addressing the challenges. But this is a thing that has to be negotiated and built up in the community, in the university with the main stakeholder groups. We don't provide any further tools on that. No technical.
One question, is the survey anonymous? Because this is important, right? This is private information and it's anonymous for everyone that responds.
Yeah, there are different privacy settings, and if you check the manual, you see we have like subdivided them in 3 big groups. One is, paranoid, let's say, privacy settings, which is totally anonymized, and the Lime survey platform usually collects data, of the address of the computer address and the date and the link, how people enter and submit. But all this can be anonymized completely. And then there are other options, which is more comfortable also in terms of sending reminders, for example, sending personalized invitations. And this then needs more metadata. Although this metadata never is part of the results of the raw data matrix, it's much more comfortable, to keep tracking and actually drive up your response rate. And we have had both of these privacy modes being used, which again depends really a lot on how trusted the people are inside the university who run this and then do the analysis with the data.
Great, thank you, Jörg. We have another question from Elisa Labore. What would you recommend to generate traction to adopt this tool in a context such as the Mexican, where having a GEP or gender equality plan is not mandatory?
Well, in order to, I think, again, I mean, what are really the main groups, stakeholder groups? Might be students, I mean, gender-based violence is an issue. If you think about Me Too or, other things, there's really a big need. And this has happened in other countries as well, here in Europe, where gender-based violence really was, it's enough. We don't take this anymore. And then there's like a lot of mobilization going on that maybe you could capture or tap into and say, well, let's look, let's do a survey and see what's happening inside our organization. Or there might be other main challenges related to equality. I don't know, if you look at promotion rates inside the university, how big is the vertical segregation if you go to the highest position of professorship? So there are these type of questions which might be, an issue might be discussed in different panels and commissions, and I would try to tap into that and say, well, let's do a good audit, even if this doesn't take us to a full gender equality plan. Let's take a good audit and really to see what's going on in our organization, get a clearer picture.
I agree. Also, I think this is related to Araceli Lugo question, who asked, how is it possible that that tool could help us to reinforce academic programs in high school?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood this.
Araceli, would you like to rephrase your question? But I'm going to read it again. How is it possible that that tool could help us to reinforce academic programs in high school?
In high school? High school? No, it's not. I don't think it's useful for high school because the context of, education at the high school level, I think it's rather different. I don't think you would cover that. I would be careful using it in a high school context because on the one hand, you have the teachers and then you have the students. Some of them, I'm not sure about the age, are minors, and then it's a whole other story.
Yeah, so it's important to mention that this tool has been built exclusively for higher education institutions, but maybe it can be used for other kinds of organizations. Do you think it's replicable?
Yeah. We had now many city councils have used it actually. This is where we also improved on, the separation between academic and administrative stuff. So it's been used by city councils, for example, and other organizations could use it as well. I mean, many organizations, I think, working also research centers, which do not necessarily teach, can use it. Which, as long as you want to add or update, additional questions, and should be fine.
And a final question from Macaria. She's asking if they only have 3 months to use the questionnaire for free.
No, you can use it. The main thing is what we want to avoid is that, setting up, it's easy to ask for an account. It's not so easy to set it up for us. And then it doesn't get used. So, we want to make a little buffer there and say, be clear what you need to do and what's involved, and you get permission from your organization. And once you have that, we give you the account. The account then can be active for, I don't know, half a year. We don't really care, but just, make it a little bit more difficult, this initial, the start of it, because we had lots of requests for setting up account, which then, never got used.
Yes, thank you, Jörg. We're running out of time, but thank you for reminding us the importance of data collection and giving us incentives for higher education institutions to work on their gender equality plans. And well, we will share with you by the end of the session a code. It's a survey, so please, it will be excellent if you help us to complete it. It's really, really short and will give us some insights of the session. And please feel free to share with us the topics that you would like us to present in the future. We will be sharing the presentation, as I mentioned before, Inspire Social Networks on the chat box for all of you that want to learn more about this great initiative. And a big thank you for you, Jörg, that gave us this time to present this amazing tool. And thank you, everyone, for your time. And I hope it was useful for everyone.
Okay.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.